To really understand how deep this tragedy cuts, you have to know about the love that came before it. This wasn't just any king and queen. This was Rama of Ayodhya, the seventh avatar of the god Vishnu, a man seen as the living embodiment of dharma, of duty, righteousness, and moral perfection. And his wife, Sita, was just as extraordinary. Believed to be an avatar of the goddess Lakshmi and a daughter of the earth itself, she was the picture of grace, loyalty, and strength. Their story began like a fairy tale. Rama won her hand by proving his divine strength, being the only man alive who could lift and string the celestial bow of the god Shiva. Their connection was instant, a bond between two halves of the same soul. So, when court politics, fueled by a jealous stepmother, got Rama exiled from his own kingdom for 14 years, he accepted his fate with quiet grace. He was ready to go alone. But Sita wouldn't have it. She argued that her place was by his side and that the palace was a prison without him. A husband's path, she declared, is also his wife. Her duty was to him, whether in a palace or a forest. Reluctantly, Rama agreed. Together with his loyal brother Lakshmana, they left civilization behind. Those years in the forest, despite the hardship, were strangely peaceful. They lived simply in tune with nature, their love deepening away from the pressures of court life. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana were an unbreakable team, self-sufficient, content, and completely devoted to each other. But paradise was about to be shattered. The forests of ancient India weren't empty, they were home to powerful demons and celestial beings. News of the exiled prince and his beautiful wife had traveled, and it reached the ears of the most feared being in the land, Ravana, the 10-headed demon king of Lanka. Ravana, a being of immense power, intelligence, and ego, became obsessed with possessing Sita. Through trickery, he lured Rama and Lakshmana away from their hut with a magical golden deer. While they were gone, he disguised himself as a holy man asking for charity. The moment Sita stepped outside the protective boundary Lakshmana had drawn, the demon king seized her. He revealed his terrifying true form and dragged her onto his flying chariot, spiriting her away across the ocean to his island fortress of Lanka. The abduction of Sita wasn't just a kidnapping, it was a cosmic challenge, an act of evil that would set off a war that shook heaven and earth. When Rama returned to that empty hut, he spiraled into a grief and rage he'd never known. The perfect man, the calm prince, was completely broken. He wandered the forest like a madman, asking the trees, the rivers, and the animals if they had seen his beloved Sita. His pain was so raw it seemed to bend the world around him. But his despair quickly turned to resolve. This was no ordinary man. This was a god in human form, and he would tear the world apart to get his wife back. His quest led him to an alliance with the Vanara, a race of intelligent monkeys, and their mighty hero, Hanuman. It was Hanuman, who could leap across oceans, who finally found Sita. He discovered her in a garden in Lanka, grieving and alone, but totally defiant. She had refused all of Ravana's advances, her heart and mind fixed only on Rama. Hanuman returned with her message of hope and a piece of her jewelry as proof, firing up Rama and his new army. What followed was one of the greatest wars in all of mythology. An army of monkeys and bears, led by a god-king, built a floating bridge across the ocean to Lanka. The war was long and brutal. Heroes fell on both sides. The sky lit up with celestial weapons, as the ground ran red with blood. Rama and his brother Lakshmana fought with divine fury, tearing through Ravana's legions. Finally, it came down to a duel between the two great rivals, Rama, the symbol of order, and Ravana, the symbol of chaos. After a battle so intense the gods themselves trembled. Rama unleashed a divine arrow, the Brahmastra, and struck Ravana down. The war was over. The demon king was dead. Sita was free. This reunion should have been the triumphant climax of the story. The warriors celebrated, the heavens rained flowers, and Sita was brought before her victorious husband. But the man she saw wasn't the loving husband she had dreamed of for all those months. Rama was cold and distant, his face a mask of conflict, and then he spoke words sharper than any arrow. He told her he hadn't fought this war for her, but for the honor of his family, to wash away the stain of her abduction. He looked at the woman who had suffered for his sake, and cast doubt on her purity. He questioned if she had remained faithful in another man's power. He declared that she was now painful for him to look at. He could not take her back. The shock was absolute. Lakshmana, his loyal brother, stared at Rama in disbelief and fury. Sita, her heart shattering, stood in stunned silence. She had endured a monster's threats, the crushing loneliness of captivity, all of it fueled by her unwavering faith in Rama. And this was her reward: to be doubted and publicly shamed by the man she lived for. Her pain turned into a steely resolve. If words weren't enough, if her devotion wasn't enough, then she would provide proof so final that no one could ever question her again. It was Sita, not Rama, who demanded the ordeal. She turned to a horrified Lakshmana and ordered him to build a funeral pyre. "It is the only remedy for this," she said, her voice shaking with righteous anger. The pyre was built. The logs were stacked high, and the fire was lit, blazing with a terrifying heat that made the crowds pull back. Rama just stood there, his face unreadable, his heart a storm of conflict. He was the king, and a king's wife had to be above all suspicion. This was his Rajya dharma, his kingly duty. And in that moment, that duty seemed more important than his love, more important than his own heart. He knew she was innocent, yet he let it happen for the sake of his people, for the sake of a world that was watching. Sita walked around her husband, her head held high. She approached the inferno, prayed to Agni, the god of fire, to be her witness, and then, without hesitating, she walked into the heart of the blaze. A gasp of horror went through the crowd as the flame surged, swallowing her whole. For a moment, there was only the sound of the raging fire. Rama's composure finally broke, and tears streamed down his face. He had let his duty as a king push him to an act of monstrous cruelty against the woman he loved more than life itself. But then, a miracle. The flames parted. From the center of the pyre, the fire god Agni himself rose up, glowing and unharmed. In his arms, he held Sita, looking as serene and beautiful as ever. Not a single hair was singed, her clothes untouched by soot or ash. Agni presented her to Rama, his voice booming for all to hear. He declared her to be utterly pure, untouched by sin, and commanded Rama to accept her. The vindication was total. All doubt was erased, replaced by celebration. Rama, overcome with joy and relief, took Sita back. He confessed that he had never really doubted her in his heart, but had allowed the trial to happen to prove her purity to the world. For a moment, it seemed the nightmare was over. They returned to Ayodhya, their 14-year exile complete, and Rama was crowned king. A golden age began, a time of perfect justice and prosperity known as Rajya. It seemed that, after all the pain, they had finally found their happily ever after. But whispers are like embers. Even after a fire is put out, they can smolder in the dark, just waiting for a breath of air to flare up again. This conflict between personal love and public duty is a theme you see throughout history and mythology. Rama was faced with an impossible choice: be a good husband or be a perfect king in the eyes of his people. What do you think he should have done? Let us know in the comments below what choice you would have made in his position. For a time, life in Ayodhya was peaceful. Rama was a wise and compassionate ruler, and Sita was a beloved queen. She was now pregnant with Rama's heirs, and the kingdom's future looked bright. But the story of her captivity in Lanka just wouldn't die. While the nobles and warriors had seen the trial by fire, the common folk hadn't. For them, it was just a story. And stories get twisted. Rama, dedicated to being a perfect king, had spies report to him what the people were saying good and bad so he could better serve them. One day, a spy brought him a piece of gossip that would seal Sita's fate. The spy overheard a simple washerman arguing with his wife, who he'd kicked out for spending one night away from home. In his anger, the man shouted, "I am not the great King Rama, to take back a wife who has lived in another man's house." The words struck Rama like a physical blow. It was one thing to have his own private doubts, it was another to become a common joke, a cautionary tale for weak husbands. The whisper, once locked in his own mind, was now loose in his kingdom. It showed him that a deep suspicion was growing among his people, threatening the moral authority of his throne. He realized that as long as Sita, a queen with a questionable past, sat beside him, his own rule would be questioned. Every decision he made could be seen as tainted. Once again, Rama was trapped between his love and his duty. He was a husband who knew his wife was innocent. But he was also a king who believed his first duty was to his people and to the flawless image of his office. A king and queen had to be like Caesar's wife, not just innocent, but completely above suspicion. In his mind, the happiness of the entire kingdom rested on his personal sacrifice. And so, with a heart heavier than stone, he made the most devastating decision of his life. He wouldn't confront the gossipers. He wouldn't try to re-educate his people. He wouldn't stand by his wife and defy public opinion. No. He would give the people what their suspicious minds demanded. He would remove the source of the gossip. He would exile his queen. He couldn't even do it face to face. He called for his brother Lakshmana, his voice filled with a grief so deep it barely sounded human. He explained the impossible choice he faced and ordered his brother to take the pregnant Sita deep into the forest, across the river Ganges, and abandon her near the hermitage of the sage Valmiki. Lakshmana was horrified. He argued and pleaded, but the king's command was absolute, pretending it was to fulfill Sita's wish to revisit the forests of their exile. Lakshmana escorted the happy, unsuspecting queen out of the city. When they reached the desolate riverbank, he finally broke down in tears and told her of Rama's terrible decree. The shock was absolute. This was a betrayal far worse than the trial by fire. At least then, she'd had a chance to prove herself. This was a cold, silent judgment, delivered from afar with no trial and no recourse. There was no pyre to walk into this time, only the lonely, dark forest. Her pleas were heartbreaking, but Lakshmana's orders were unshakable. He ferried her across the river and left her on the other side a pregnant, abandoned queen, exiled by the very man for whom she had walked through fire. But Sita didn't perish in the forest. She found refuge at the hermitage of the sage Valmiki, who knew who she was. There, as a single mother, she gave birth to and raised Rama's twin sons, Lava and Kusha. She raised them to be as strong and righteous as the father who had abandoned them. Rama, back in Ayodhya, ruled his perfect kingdom, but his heart was a void. He lived the rest of his life in sorrow, carrying out his kingly duties with a hollowed-out soul. When religious ceremonies required his wife's presence, he refused to remarry. Instead, he commissioned a golden statue of Sita, which he placed by his side, a constant, glittering reminder of the wife he had exiled and the love he had sacrificed for his throne. He had chosen to be a perfect king, and in doing so, had condemned himself to be a broken man. The story of Rama and Sita is a profound tragedy. It's a story about how even divine proof of innocence is no match for the poison of public suspicion. Sita passed the trial of the gods, emerging from the fire unscathed as a testament to her purity. But she could not pass the trial of men, the court of gossip and rumor that ultimately condemned her. Her tale serves as a timeless and brutal reminder that a person's greatest trial isn't always a blazing fire, but the cold and unyielding judgment of the world. The story of Rama and Sita has been debated for centuries, a complex epic of duty, love, and sacrifice. If you're fascinated by complex tales from mythology and history like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.